Hi, welcome to Parenting and Teaching with Richie Huffman. I'm Richie Huffman, President and CEO of Celebrate Preschools. On these podcasts, we'll be talking to real parents, teachers about what's going on at home, in the classroom, and everything in between. I hope you find these conversations informative, helpful, sometimes funny, and sometimes serious. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're joined by Dr. Barbara O'Neill. Welcome, Barbara.
Hi.
And you are a trainer, speaker.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And you are a trainer, speaker, and online course creator.
That's true.
And the topic we'll be talking about is transforming challenging behavior. So very exciting topic, and I can't wait to hear from you. So I know you're on a Zoom call with us this morning from California.
We're to do some training.
Yeah. So let's get started. So tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and how long you've been in the field of early education.
Sure. I've been in the field for about 25 years now, I believe it is. And I started out as a floating teacher's aide in a child care center in the suburbs of Minneapolis. And then a teacher and a preschool special ed teacher in New York, where I'm originally from. So I moved back to New York. And then I went on to become a professor of early childhood and also taught early childhood special ed courses and a center director for a little while at a campus-based program. And then I made the shift to setting off on my own consulting with programs.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, you've been all over.
You.
Very impressive. So you and I have kind of been in this probably at the same time. I'm coming up also on my 25th year.
Oh, okay, great.
So congratulations.
Wow. Well, to you too.
Yeah, thank you.
So Barb, we want to talk about behavior obviously today because that's what you specialize in. And I myself am a teacher and I have a special ed background. But for our listeners who might just hear the word challenging behaviors all the time, can we kind of start at the beginning and talk about what that means? What is behavior defined as? And how can we start talking about challenging behaviors?
Yeah, great question. I think, in terms of some formal definitions of, I'm using air quotes here for those who can only hear, of challenging behavior. I would say it's any behavior that interferes with the child's ability to and be a part of the community, and make a distinction between challenging behavior maybe that is the result of the child having experienced some trauma versus other kinds of challenging behavior or challenging behavior based on, the child has a disability or delay, like kind of have some distinctions of like what's really challenging behavior. But I guess for me, I'm super pragmatic about it. So if it's a challenge that's fine to address in a session on challenging behavior, and some of that is, in my experience, once I start talking to teachers, that maybe their expectations are actually not the most appropriate. So the behavior is a result of the teacher trying to get the group of children or the individual to do something that's maybe not really all that mentally appropriate. But I don't spend a lot of time in my training getting into that, because if the teacher feels challenged, we will get into that, but I'm not going to dispute them on, that's not really challenging behavior. It's still a question of, well, what do we need to do to shift this, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all relative sometimes. And I know as a teacher, when you hear that there's this really challenging kid coming up to your grade the next year, it always puts such a bad stigma on that child. But I think that it's all relative, like you said, and it's what a teacher calls challenging and maybe not necessarily what is actually challenging. And some personalities just work better with different kids. So yeah, I've had those kids before that I've been nervous. I'm doing air quotes too. I've been nervous to get because I heard such negative things about their challenging behaviors from the teacher before me. And then it turns out that maybe it actually wasn't. It was just how you deliver those instructions and your expectations. So is that's something you kind of work?
Yeah.
Dr. New, I have a question. I have a question for you in that, because I'm a dad of 5. So, I get calls all the time with my children with behavior problems, right? And I think there's a big, I don't know how to say it, but I think there's a big difference, I guess, between what a teacher may feel a behavior problem is versus what a parent may feel the behavior problem is. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think, for some reason, how this often plays out is it can become, unfortunately, somewhat adversarial between teachers or programs and parents in terms of, it's sometimes easy for teachers to feel like they kind of want the parent to fix it, like, oh, your limits at home. And then the parent feels like judged, perhaps, or feel like, well, it's happening at school, you should take care of it at school. So that's one way I see the mismatch happening sometimes. On the other hand, sometimes parents will say, oh, he scraped his plate after lunch, because there is this thing where the whole group is doing it. Some kids will, follow along, and then the parents, the same thing that parent could be getting into a power struggle about because they don't have those role models and peers at school. But those were some of my thoughts. I'm not quite sure that's getting at what you were saying. Do you want to say more about your examples? Yeah,
I think you touched on it a little bit. I was more in the area of the fact that, behavior, I think behavior is, something that if I have a teacher that calls and says, Preston had some behavior issues today. Okay, what exactly does that mean? It means that he wasn't acting the way I wanted him to act today. So the expectations of a 13-year-old boy may be, you come in, you sit down, you be quiet, you speak when I ask you to speak, and you raise your hand. I don't know if those expectations, which now we call behavior issues, work anymore in today's society, or in the classrooms today.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I see it as sometimes with that, it could really go in either direction, because sometimes, so I'm thinking for you as the parent, you're on the side of seeing like, oh yeah, he's being the kid, he's 13-year-old. Whereas sometimes, the parents have very strict for like 100% compliance, whereas the teacher might have more of a flexible and like, oh, well, that's the way he is, or, that's his age. So, to me, it can just be variable how we all see behavior and what's expected of children. And I will say just one other thought on that. It is different, a child who's not in directions versus a child who's hitting or aggressing or hurting other children, right? Or running out of the classroom, which is really dangerous. So there is, I don't want to like lump all these things together.
I love what you said. You said 100% compliant.
Right.
I love that. It's like, do some teachers actually have that expectation that a child's going to be 100% compliant?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like, I'm not at all here I'm an advocate for teachers.
I know.
I'm not saying anything negative, but I think sometimes it can seem that way, and I don't know if that's a conscious thought or not.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm a huge advocate for teachers too. We have, 900 or 1,000 teachers that work here at Celebrate. I'm just saying if they listen to this podcast, that maybe that might resonate with them. Yeah. That the fact is, I should not expect my children to be 100% compliant.
Right.
So what is the main focus of talk to us a little bit about the main focus of your trainings, because I know you work primarily with teachers and we've been talking about parents a little bit, but kind of where do you start? What's that main focus and those strategies that you start to work with teachers on as they're listening to this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work predominantly with early childhood. I know early childhood goes up to second or even third grade days in my work as an independent trainer. I'm mostly working with preschool and below. Of course, sometimes there's school age teachers in there as well if I'm working with a program that goes up through the school age, after school care. And what I always start my trainings with is some exercises to help teachers realize, and I think it goes directly to what we were just speaking about, what kind of mindset do they go into working with children who are exhibiting challenging behaviors with. And I share with them some of my history to where I loved being an early childhood teacher immediately, but I really felt a lack of confidence in working with children who exhibited behavioral challenges. I had certain children, like this one boy I call Robert, not his real name, even though it was 25 years ago, I changed his name. Who I would just always get into those power struggles with, and it really made me question being an old. And then flash forward to when I was a special ed teacher, and I had a really challenging little girl who was assigned to me, and I was nervous about it, the same way that you were saying, that you heard this child's reputation, right? And then my supervisor actually said to me, "Oh yeah, that's why we gave her to you."
I've heard that before.
Oh,
yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
You're good.
Here's
So
what you get for being good.
Story. What? Yeah, exactly. Right. So here's what we're going to give you. And so I use that as a lead-in to help teachers think about, what is the mindset that they're going into. And I build on the work of Carol Dweck, who offers a fixed versus a growth mindset, and try to help teachers to get into that growth mindset. Like, I can grow my skills in this area. I can help the children. So that's what I do first, 9 times out of 10. Yeah. I don't want to just go on and on, so I'll pause there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know the power of yet is real big with the younger generation of teachers right now. So I know that's important in schools, and so that's trickling down, at least from what I've seen.
What's that mean?
The power of yet is that I can't do it yet. They teach kids to what she was referring to as growth mindset, as having that mindset that you might not be able to do it now, but you can do it, instead of saying I can't and I won't and I don't.
Okay.
But it's nice, nice strategy to teach kids, especially when they're young.
Yeah, and it seems like it's really made its way into a lot of, as you're saying, elementary schools. And for me, I'm happy for the teachers to approach the children with, you're not doing that yet, but just to clarify, I'm doing it for themselves, like to help them reflect. And can they say to themselves, like, I'm not yet feeling like a rock star when it comes to challenging behavior.
Right.
But that's the direction I'm moving in.
Dr. O'Neill, what are some other strategies that you're teaching?
So the other 2 main things that I teach is I teach how to connect with a child during play. I teach something called improv-based play support. So we actually get to do some theater improv games in that training, which is kind of fun. And I show teachers some video where other teachers, I'm in some of the videos too, but myself and the teachers I was training are actually using this strategy, which we call yes and, that comes from the world of theater improv, to say, okay, how can I accept what the child's bringing and build on it? And so we use that strategy, a lens, to view interactions with children both in and out of play. So in play, it's a way to just help extend the child's focus and develop a rapport. So it's really helpful if, you've been getting into that negativity with the child, or if you have that child who's splitting from one area to the other, you can use this strategy of just saying yes and accepting their off engagement. But then we use that lens of yes and to think, okay, this child's struggling to get outside, make that transition through cleanup. How can we use an interest of that child to help them transition? So it could be something as simple as, we know they struggle with the transition, but when they get out there, they like to play with bubbles. We'll give them the bubbles to hold. And even before they've cleaned up their toys, let them coming as a motivator. So as soon as you clean up toys, you can carry the bubbles for me to go outside. So that's a big training that I do, is on the play support and building on the strengths. And then the the second day rather, if I'm invited for 2 days, I'll do a training on circle time and transition strategies. Yeah.
Wow.
And I know one of the things you advocate for teachers is using a class puppet. I've seen pictures on your website and he's adorable. How can this help with classroom management or help prevent those challenging behaviors?
Yeah. Well, that is one of my favorite things. And it's something that I learned, just from other teachers that I worked with. It wasn't something that I learned in school. I do have Miniko here, but I know most people will just be watching. But
he's cute.
She's a little shy anyway. She's kind of warm, I guess we would say. But what I teach teachers to do is to, find a puppet that they really resonate with and to just take it out with the children. And I do advocate kind of having the puppet be shy at first. You don't have to do it that way, but it can be a nice way to build intrigue with the children. And, you can say, oh, it's Miniko's first day at school. She's never been. And so basically it's a great visual, right, to capture the children's attention. And then you can use it so the children develop a relationship with the puppet. And then you can address anything using the puppet. So, say, Allie, you have a new sibling at your house, and we've noticed some behavioral issues that have coincided with that, as is often the case. Rather than trying to make you talk about your new sibling, which you may or may not want to do, I can just put that scenario on my puppet and say, Miniko has a new baby at her house and this is happening. And then sometimes the children will say, I have a baby at my house too. And that will get them talking and they can relate. You can use it for if you've had behavioral issues, say like conflict in the block center. You can have Miniko talk with the children about what happened to her in the block center and have them generate ideas on how to solve that problem. But you can also use it to move through transitions, or if it's getting too loud in the classroom, you can bring the puppet out to say, oh, that's hurting her ears. And they'll, especially over time, the children are very empathetic with the puppet. Most children, 9 times out of 10. So it's kind of endless. And for teachers who resonate with it and into it, they usually find their own ways that probably I'm not even thinking yet.
Why does that strategy work?
You're the second person that's asked me that in the last week, and I've never had anyone ask me that before. It's such an interesting question. I think it's because, it's related to why I advocate for connecting with a child through play as a maybe not always thought about antidote to challenging behavior. I think that play and pretend is just where it's at. And so children can just be captivated by the puppet. And even if they say to you, is it alive? Is it real? And you say no, which is, you could say, what do you think? Or you can answer that question. It can be really magical for them. And one of the things I'm on a mission is, make their classrooms a little more magical for children, because young children really kind of do believe in magic and pretend, and they love dinosaurs and monsters. And so I think the puppet taps into that propensity for play and pretend. Wow. That's my hypothesis. Yeah. I don't know.
That's so cool.
Do you all have a thought on that?
I don't know. I just wanted to hear, you're much more educated in this than I am. And I just thought that maybe it's just taking the spotlight off of me and the responsibility off of me as a child and just, putting it on someone else. That's just my thought.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of it is the imagination too, is it's just something in the classroom that the teacher's buying into with imagination, because I know there's not a whole lot of time for the teacher to maybe play with the children the same way as they play with dolls and have tea parties if they're little girls. And I don't think you have those same moments with kids in school. So I think by having a puppet, it's maybe making that connection between teacher imaginative play and that kind of special imaginary thing. I mean,
listening to you two talk, when you imagine and you dream, you kind of just, there's no judgment. There's no, there's nothing there when we dream and imagine. No one's judging me. No one's holding me accountable for this particular moment. It's just, we're just both,
Yeah.
I don't want to say free, but we're just kind of both,
Yeah.
unjust.
Yeah, I think it's cool. I never used a puppet, but I love the idea of it. I kind of have a question for teachers too, who you come into the school year a lot of times, or at least I did. And I know you're really gung-ho about the year and you're excited and you have all these new strategies. And there's usually that quote unquote honeymoon phase of when all the kids are fantastic and they listen and they're quote unquote easy at the start of the year. But what happens now where we're coming into the winter and there are those few kids in your class who are just off the walls, they're aggressive, maybe they're having those challenging behaviors that we were talking about. Where do you suggest a teacher goes who maybe doesn't have the luxury of going to a training, or, I mean, where do they start? Do they start by getting a puppet? Do they start by going to your website? Like what do they do when they feel like they're tapped out and they're alone and they're just looking for anything? Where do they start?
Yeah. Well, in terms of the first steps that I would recommend, any extra, research or training, as you're saying, or even taking a minute to Google online, I really would say, I thought it was interesting what you said, about play, right? Like that connecting with that child through play, that when you use the puppet, you are doing that at, say, a large group experience, as opposed to taking the time to get into the centers, which I do advocate. Boys, girls, adults, visiting grandparents, get them into the centers, get them to play with dolls and in the housekeeping. But that is actually what I would say is the first step for a teacher, is to follow that child into the area of the classroom they enjoy during the center time and just see if you can mirror their use of materials. Be a very powerful way to connect, especially if we're always being reactive to, that you're interacting with them after they hit or after they throw something. So when you go into the play with them, you make that connection and you can see what their interests are and kind of what makes them tick. The other recommend is, looking at what you might be doing after the behavior, where you're actually working against yourself. I know we always want to teach prevention, but you don't always manage to prevent, right? So if teachers do want strategies on prevention, I do have, just on my website, a cheat sheet. That's kind of like my crash course in top tips that might help them. But the other thing is to make sure once a child is hitting, that you're not escalating the behavior. Staying calm yourself so they can pick up on that energy and body language. You're not talking, reminding them of the rule, that you're just, I'm kind of putting my arms out here for those who aren't watching the video version of this. You're keeping the other children safe. Like you're like, Michael needs a little space right now. And you keep the other children from getting hurt. And you're just helping the child to de-escalate.
Right.
So that's the other. Always we want prevention, but then also to make sure that once things control and trying to bring that child back down to regulation.
And is everything you're talking about right now kind of wrapped into those 9 powerful strategies, as you call them on your website, of what you talk to teachers about that they forgot or underused? Is that kind of wrapped into that?
Yeah, great question. The cheat sheet and where I have the 9 strategies that you referenced is more proactive strategies. I do also, if people want to download that, they'll get an email from me with some other resources. And then I have a link actually to a great video where I interviewed 2 colleagues of mine, Barb Avila and Christy Preddy-Franzak. And I have that interview available online for free. And they talk about those de-escalating strategies to make sure you're not exacerbating a tantrum or something.
Right.
But that's really in the cheat sheet. Yeah.
And I saw the keynote that you offer is called "What If You Love Challenging Behaviors?" And I think that's such a funny title. I love it actually, because you hear those teachers, going back to what you said in the beginning, you hear those teachers that say, and I was even one of them that said, like, I love the tough kid. Okay. I love that title, but again, that's why I got the tough kids. So can you give us a sneak peek into what you share in that segment of your trainings?
Yeah, I'm not going to give away my whole talk here,
right.
But I like to start with that idea because, I talk to directors and teachers all the time, but directors of programs are predominantly who's hiring me, or, early childhood folks organizing conferences. And I hear universally, we're seeing more kids presenting challenging behavior. They're exhibiting the behavior more of the time, and the behavior is getting worse. And so I feel some real discouragement in this area these days. And then a lot of states, as well as the National Head Start standards, now dictate, we can't ask children to leave, which is kind of the polite way of saying expulsion, for behavior. And so people are struggling. And I think that address that and change or transform, as I like to say, not just the behavior of individual children, but transform this almost epidemic in our field, that we have to just radically shift our mindset, and propose, what if we love this? What if we embraced it? And instead of saying they shouldn't be doing this, just say, this is the work, and we're going to do it, and we're going to build capacity in our programs. And I think that's something that, how we're looking about it, talk needed if we're going to really address this problem. So
I would agree with you 100%. I wrote down two things. One, and you started out very early by talking about the mindset of the teacher. But then as schools, we have to continuously bring in people like yourself to help these teachers with the strategies and the skill set to enjoy the classroom better. So the overall is that our children have a better experience inside the classroom, and our teachers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really like looking at that, I think, along with the mindset, especially for administrators listening, thinking about what is the program culture you're creating around the topic of challenging behavior and working with those children and families.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for your time this morning, and we will absolutely have you come in here at Celebrate and speak to our teachers. So I really look forward to that.
Oh, thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me, and for the work you're doing with, doing this podcast and making information available to parents and teachers and directors. I think it's so important to have these kind of resources.
And thank you for what you're doing also.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Dr. O'Neill, thank you so much.
And last to close out for our listeners who are tuning in on YouTube or with one of our podcasts that they download, you can visit www.transformchallengingbehavior.com to get those 9 powerful strategies we talked about and some other amazing resources from Dr. O'Neill.
Oh, thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today on Parenting and Teaching with Richie Huffman.
Thanks for tuning in. And remember, childhood only comes this way but once.
For more information, head on over to richiehuffman.com.
I'm Richie.
And I'm Allie.
And we look forward to seeing you again on another podcast.